Royalties Forensics. This is a beginner's presentation for unclaimed royalties in the United States and Canada. For those of you who have some experience already handling unpaid royalties or unclaimed royalties, some of this might be information you're already aware of. For those of you who are new to the space or trying to learn how to go about discovering unclaimed royalties, this workshop should provide a primer to really getting started to the space. So I'm just going to give a minute for individuals to log in. All right. So again, my name is Dae Bogan. I am currently the CEO and co-founder of a music rights administration platform called Tune Registry. I'm the founder of Rights Department, which helps music entrepreneurs and music tech startup founders navigate the business planning and rights implementation. I'm also a lecturer at UCLA, where I teach music industry entrepreneurship. And previously, I founded the world's first search engine of unclaimed music royalties and licenses called Royalty Claim. And I've also owned and operated an independent record label, a music publishing company, and an artist management firm where I first started experiencing having to deal with these issues. I hold a master's degree in music industry administration with a focus on music publishing and copyright administration from California State University, Northridge. So what is music royalties forensics? So music royalties forensics is the process of searching for, identifying, and claiming music royalties in a timely manner. Music royalty forensics specialists should understand the ways in which music is directly and indirectly monetized. You should stay up to date on changes in the music licensing ecosystem, including your local territory, regionally in terms of, for example, North America is considered a region in the publishing space, and then globally. Things are changing often in different territories. The way that not only music is licensed, but also new entitlements come under protection by either direct agreements or legislative action. For example, in the United States, we recently passed the Music Modernization Act, which included a number of titles to provide provisions for rights holders and creators to receive royalties through certain channels. It also brought protections of works that previously were not protected, so that opened up additional royalty opportunities for older works. So just knowing that new legislation can create new royalty opportunities or change the way those opportunities are available to different sources. So it's important to just make sure that you're keeping up to date on what changes happens in the space. For those of you who are just joining us, we're on the very first slide, so you haven't really missed anything. Just covering what is music royalties forensics. Last thing is you should create and nurture relationships with representatives at royalty collection societies and unclaimed royalty funds. Knowing who you need to contact to address an issue or to try to figure something out on behalf of your copyrights or a client is important. So building those relationships is going to help get things done quicker. It's going to help to resolve potential issues or disputes quicker, so that you can unlock royalties and not have to deal with the normal waiting time that's associated through the normal channels of support. So who benefits from music royalties forensics? Well, obviously music creators benefit, but for music creators, they need to make sure that they're receiving the maximum amount of income for the music that they create. For labels and publishers and other types of rights holders, obviously, investing into creators, investing into new works, demands a return on investment, and being able to identify where royalties are generated and the methods of unlocking those royalties are important. Managers and other representatives who are paid based on commissions benefit. If you're an artist manager and you have a client who doesn't have a publisher or doesn't have a label, it's really important to be able to understand how music is monetized and how to track down those royalties, since generally speaking, managers are not paid up front, but rather paid on a commission of earnings. And if you're not able to collect, if an artist is not able to collect on those earnings, then obviously that directly impacts a manager's income. It's the same thing for any types of other representatives that are earning income based on the commission of the artist's income. And then lastly, families, heirs, estates, and beneficiaries. It's also important to them. When you're creating music, creating copyrights, these are assets that have a very, very long duration for being able to benefit from the popularity and the growth of those assets. So it's important to families and heirs and estates to if they're going to receive or be the recipient of copyrights or income participation in copyrights, it's also important that they understand how to collect on their entitlements based on being a recipient or a beneficiary. So there's different kind of groups of people that obviously benefit from music royalties forensics, and whether you hire an outside person to handle this stuff. Generally speaking, music publishing companies have their own internal kind of music royalties forensics person or personnel. They may not have a title that includes music royalties forensics, but they certainly are performing the tasks that would be normal to a specialist that are helping to collect royalties or find or uncover royalties. So some key factors to consider in every case of trying to handle royalty collections or trying to identify or hunt down royalties. And before I go into this, let me also say that although they are related, auditing is totally different. So being a music royalties forensics specialist and being an auditor are completely two different things, although they tend to work together. So if you're an auditor, your job is really looking at statements and calculating royalties that have been earned and trying to identify or reconcile statements against usage to determine if there was any kind of potentially missing royalty payments that have been accounted for but not necessarily paid out. That's different than forensics. Royalty forensics is looking at trying to identify royalties that have not been accounted to the income participant. So for example, I may receive a statement that says I'm owed $1,000, but the payment that I received was $900. Or I might receive a log sheet that shows usage that would calculate up to $1,000, but my payment was only $900. That's more of an auditing function to understand why is there a discrepancy between what you receive in your payment versus what has been reported in terms of the statements of usage and the income statements. Also, from an auditing standpoint, is looking at your contracts, whether it's contract with a label or contract with a publisher, to determine if certain rights or certain percentages are not being properly paid out. That's different than music royalties forensics, where we're trying to identify not only some of that stuff, but more importantly, is there royalties accruing out there in the marketplace that is not being properly allocated to the right people? And if so, how do we go about finding that? And then how do we go about unlocking those royalties so that in the future it can be paid out? There can still be auditing involved in that process, but again, it's a little bit different process. So the factors to consider in every case is who is the claimant? Basically, who is the person that raised their hand to make the claim that potentially something is missing? What is the underlying copyright that is in dispute? Is it the master? Is it the musical work or composition? What is the type of use? The type of use would be able to tell us things such as, how is that use licensed in a certain territory? Who is the music user and or the obligated party or parties, meaning who's actually paying the license fees, so that we have an understanding of kind of where the whole journey of the royalties originate. What is the territory or jurisdiction of consideration? The territory is important because in certain territory, there's certain rights that exist and certain entitlements that exist, and in other territories, they do not exist. So you may argue that you are a valid claimant of a copyright that you're earning royalties against. For example, if your sound recording is being performed on a radio station in London, but the territory matters. So if I'm in the U.S. and the radio station is in London, then because of other factors such as the type of use and regulations within that territory, you may or may not have the entitlement to actually claim those royalties. So that being said, the next question is, what is the claimant's relationship to the copyright and or the type of usage in the territory of interest? So that really brings that all together, is understanding, okay, I might be a valid claimant and there might be an actual usage that's actually generating royalties, but in certain territories, there may be limitations that prevents me from unlocking those royalties. Or they do allow me to unlock those royalties, but there may be a certain process for doing it. What are the claimant's rights and entitlements? Again, that goes back to the territory. What are the rights and entitlements that you have based on that territory? And what are the relevant royalty flows? Basically, how's that income flowing from the originator, being the music user? And who are the relevant royalty collectors? Basically, what are the organizations that are collecting these royalties, and have you joined them? So what are the requirements for association? That goes back to the joining process. Have you joined them? Are you eligible to join them as a creator or as a rights holder or as a beneficiary? And then what are the statutes of limitation? So some organizations have a limitation on when you can actually collect those royalties, or for how long they're willing to hold those royalties. And then what is the claiming process? We're going to go over a little bit of this throughout this workshop, but there are specific processes involved with claiming royalties depending on where you're going. And then lastly, is claiming feasible? So at the end of the day, after doing all that work, if you identify that there's a sufficient amount of unclaimed royalties, it may make sense to spend the time going through this process. But if you're not sure, it's hard to know if after going through all this process, there's going to be $5 waiting for you, or 500 or 5,000. I've had clients in the past who were able to unlock tens of thousands of dollars in unclaimed royalties. And I've had clients who only were able to unlock a couple hundred. It really depends on a number of factors that, unfortunately, it's really difficult to know, which is another difference between auditing and royalty forensics, is that with auditing, you generally have an idea of how much royalties are missing because your auditor is doing the calculations against statements and looking at payments and trying to see if there's a difference in terms of reconciliation. With royalty forensics, we don't know how much is unpaid. We generally try to determine if there's royalties unpaid, but it's hard to know how much the royalties are because most of the organizations that collect the royalties do not publish the information on how much is actually due to any individual income participant. So these are just some factors to take into consideration as you're going through the process. So this workshop is going to be guided by these very specific questions. So we're going to go through each of these 9 questions. I'm going to jump off and dive into a couple of examples. And again, this is supposed to provide a primer, fundamentals for getting started into this space. So the 9 questions are: what are your rights, entitlements, and income participations as a music creator and or a rights holder? What are the most common royalty streams generated from a variety of music usage types, and where do those royalties flow? How are music royalties allocated and distributed by music rights organizations? What are niche funds and sub-funds that often generate unmatched so-called black box royalties, and how do you check for your records? And how to track music usage to leverage usage and detection reports to reconcile or audit royalty statements. What are some tools and resources to help you search for, identify, and claim unclaimed royalties and music licenses? What are the requirements to properly set up to be accounted to and paid royalties for previously unidentified sources going forward? And what are some tips for managing your music rights affiliations? And what are some tips for preparing your music rights and royalties for beneficiaries? So we're going to dive through this stuff now. On the right side, there's a chat box. If you have questions, feel free to ask questions. I will answer those questions as we go along. Otherwise, I'll just continue to go along. All right, so what are your rights, entitlements, and income participations as a music creator and a rights holder? So for rights, what you need to understand is while copyright is global, copyright law is local. To understand the rights that exist in a work, you must have at least a basic understanding of the copyright framework and the territory in which you're evaluating. So rights include the exclusive rights that are granted by the actual copyright, exceptions to those rights. So understanding, the exceptions to those rights are also important because that may indicate why there may not be royalties due in certain cases. And then also understanding the duration of rights. So copyright duration in the United States is the life of the author plus 70 years. For work made for hire, meaning if you're hired, generally, a lot of record deals are work made for hire record deals. Sometimes artists, especially independent artists who've been able to generate a sufficient buzz or career before signing to a record label, can license their masters to a label instead of entering into a work for hire where they're hired to perform on recordings. So knowing whether or not you're doing a work made for hire versus assignment of rights will also indicate the duration of the term. So for work made for hire in the United States, the duration is 95 years from the date of publication or 120 years from the date of creation, whichever expires first. In Canada, the copyright, as well as moral rights and paternity rights, the duration is the life of the author plus 50 years. And for work made for hire, the duration is still the life of the author plus 50 years. Earlier, I talked about when you're handling a music forensics case, you want to know, again, the territory-specific stuff. This matters. Let's say you're representing a heir or an estate for a copyright, and they're based in the United States, and you're trying to help them unlock mechanical royalties or performance royalties in Canada. Now, if the copyright still exists in the United States, let's say maybe it's 60 years after the death of that creator, so maybe their grandchildren or great-grandchildren are now the heirs or the beneficiaries of those royalties. Well, the royalties may be due in the United States, but in Canada, the work would be in public domain because the work would have already expired, the term would have terminated in Canada. So knowing that is important because that also, again, tells you whether or not you have a claim. All right, so rights by territory by asset type. So in the United States and in Canada, you have musical works or compositions and sound recordings. They're not actually necessarily protected under the same sets of laws. There are things like the United States, we have the Sound Recording Act, and we have the Digital Performance Right in Sound Recordings, which came after the actual Copyright Act, which the Copyright Act basically covers musical works, but did not cover sound recordings because sound recordings didn't exist when the Copyright Act was written originally. And the sound recordings came later, much later. It wasn't protected under the same frameworks. Same thing in other territories. So the right to reproduce or to copy a work in the United States, see it's yes across the board. In Canada, it's yes across the board. This means that you have the right, if you're the copyright owner in the musical work or the copyright owner in the sound recording, to make copies, make reproductions of your work, and to also prevent others from doing so. There are exceptions. Like I said earlier, you have to understand the exceptions. So we have a compulsory license that enables people to make a copy after you've made your first distribution, but they still have to pay royalties on that. To the right to distribute. So the right to distribute, such as distributing to digital services, distributing in physical CDs, vinyl, those rights are held with the copyright owner. The right to prepare derivative works. So basically the right for someone to make a new work based off of your original work, such as remixes, or us potentially using samples within a new work, or combining several works in a mashup. The right to publicly perform or broadcast. So the right to perform a musical work, or the right to broadcast a musical work. In the United States, we don't have what's called neighboring rights. So you see that says no for sound recording. However, there is a digital performance right in sound recordings. So that means if a sound recording is performed on terrestrial radio in the United States, which is a broadcast, that there would be no royalties earned for the sound recording. But if it's performed in Canada on a radio station, then there are royalties earned on the sound recording. And again, this is one of those cases where if you have worldwide radio airplay campaign, you want to make sure that you know what rights, what entitlements you actually have based on the territory. And then lastly, moral rights. So what moral rights is, we don't have what's called moral rights and paternity rights in the United States. So moral rights has to do with not modifying, basically not modifying the original work in a way that distorts it, or really takes it out of character from the original work. It maintains the integrity of the original work. And then and the paternity rights includes being credited for the work, and these rights together also limits how the work can be used. So in the moral rights, it also limits if the work should not be used for any type of usage, whether it's with a advertisement or a product or a service that the author would have not agreed with. So if I am if I am strongly opposed to cigarettes, and I don't want my music used in cigarette commercials, I have that actual right for the duration of my copyright to ensure that the work is not going to be used in a usage that doesn't something I don't agree with, or not with the product I don't agree with. So entitlements. So creating a copyrighted work does not always mean that you are entitled to receive the benefits of those rights directly or at all. If a work is created under a work made for hire arrangement, then the author of the work would be the organization that hired you, and this limits your entitlements. Or sometimes in certain territories, the right to actually license a particular usage is the exclusive right of an organization in that territory. So that may be a limitation as well. The territory may have imposed certain regulations on who are entitled to be compensated under local laws and international treaties. So this can include citizenship. For example, in Australia and Japan, if you're not a citizen, you wouldn't be able to collect mechanical royalties. This can include not only citizenship, but also place of residency, place of creation, and or place of first publication requirements. For example, in Canada, neighboring rights royalties for labels, the sound recording side, can be secured if the work was recorded in Canada, even if the organization is not headquartered in Canada. So knowing that, again, that may help a label, independent label. So if you're an independent label and you're close to Canada and you're able to record an album in Canada, that could potentially unlock royalties that would not have been available just simply by using that proxy. So there are some treaties that are international treaties that effectively create this reciprocal understanding between societies. So, example, we have the Berne Convention, which establishes reciprocal agreement between the signatories' territories to honor the existence of a copyright in musical works. So if a copyright exists in the home territory, then the copyright will be respected in other territories that are signatories to the Berne Convention. So for example, if I have a copyright in the United States and I go to Canada and someone is, use my music without permission, then I have the right to remedy that normally via copyright infringement or claim, and my copyright would be honored or respected by Canada because the United States and Canada are both signatories to the Berne Convention. So I don't have to, for example, register my copyright in every country, every territory. If I have a copyright in the United States, whether or not it's registered, if I have a copyright in the United States, then I have my copyright protection and all other territories are assigned to the Berne Convention. The other convention is the Rome Convention, which establishes reciprocal agreement between signatory territories to honor the existence of what's called performers' rights and producers' rights. And by producers, I don't mean music producers, but rather labels. And this is the right to the fixation, reproduction, distribution, and broadcast of performances, or the sound recording of those performances. So this is something that's super important for those of you in the United States. In the United States, the United States is not a signatory to the Rome Convention. Canada is a signatory to the Rome Convention. So because the United States is not a signatory to the Rome Convention, we do not have the traditional neighboring rights, meaning the performers' rights. So if a recording is performed on terrestrial radio or on television or in malls and retail stores and restaurants or at nightclubs, those artists or performers and those labels are not paid for those broadcasts in the United States, but they are paid in Canada. So in Canada, there's royalties for music videos. There's royalties for when music is played by DJs in a club. These royalties are for the artists, the performers, again, the performers' rights, and for the producers, meaning the labels, for the embodiment of that performance and the sound recording that they own. We don't have those rights here in the United States. So this is we're going to get to this shortly, but this obviously creates a problem. Then there's the World Intellectual Property Organization Performance and Phonographs Treaty of 1996. It's similar to the Rome Convention in that it deals with the rights of performers and producers, but specifically it's a digital transmission rights. So the United States and Canada are signatories to this treaty. So what this means is the United States does have performers' rights when it comes to the digital public performance of sound recordings, but it does not have performers' rights when it comes to the analog or broadcast of the exact same sound recording. So if my song is playing on Kiss FM on terrestrial radio, it doesn't earn any royalties for the label or the artist. But if it performs on a digital service like SiriusXM or Pandora or iHeartMedia Radio, then it does earn royalties only for the digital transmission. And obviously that creates a problem, because if I'm a artist in Canada that has performers rights, that has neighboring rights, then I'm used to earning those neighboring rights in my territory. But in the United States, those royalties are not earned. So again, that goes back to what I said. You have to understand that specific territories may have entitlements or may not have entitlements. All right, so income participants. So in some territories, income participants can be parties other than the creator of the work. A songwriter could, for example, give away a portion of the writer's share of performance income to a third party for any reason. For example, entities that buy the writer's share of publishing income from a composer, or they buy the publisher's share, which is more typical, but sometimes there is a purchase of the writer's share. Some types of rights cannot be assigned to third-party income participants. For example, neighboring rights may be limited in some territories. So, there's a number of websites that exist, like Royalty Exchange and Vest, which is VEZT, that enables creators to sell their rights or their income flows from their copyrights, and then the new buyer, the new owner, would have to go to these organizations and let them know that they're now the income participant, and receive this income flow. But you have to know in advance if you can actually sell those rights, because they may not be able to sell those rights. As an income participant, it's also very important to get the assignment of income participation in writing from the rights holder. So if I'm helping a up-and-coming artist with their career, and maybe I got them, I landed them something, a big, co-write or something, and they want to gift me or thank me by giving me income participation in the publishing. I want to get that in writing so that we can defend and support the filing of a letter of direction with the royalty collection societies. So if you don't have the documentation, it's going to be hard to say, oh yeah, I'm an income participant in this particular work, without having the actual, some kind of agreement. All right, so music royalties forensics includes copyright research to identify parties that may be entitled to certain rights and remuneration, and work title registration research to identify income participants. Where information or splits are inaccurate or missing, royalties can accrue and not be paid out to anyone, either to one party or to all parties, such as in the case of a dispute or overclaim. So let's say, for example, there's 3 writers on a song, and we all agreed that we're going to share it equally. And for some reason, it gets registered correctly with one society by one of the songwriters, and then another songwriter registered it, and the splits are different. Let's say instead of equally, there's 3 writers, one is 50% and 2 are 25%, and then someone registered as each one getting a third, versus someone registering it as 2 of the writers getting 25%, one of the writers getting 50%. That's going to create a conflict, and that's going to hold up royalties from being paid out. Or it can be there can be an overclaim. So let's say for YouTube, publishers are going in to claim to claim the composition in a audiovisual, and there's multiple claims on the same composition, and that totals up to 140%. Now it's overclaimed, and no one's going to get paid. So if it's 140%, it's overclaimed. That means all the royalties are going to be held until that dispute is resolved. If it's underclaimed, let's say only 80% has been claimed, then those individuals that claim they're up to 80% will receive their payments, but the other 20% is now being held in what's called black box. Basically, it's unmatched, it's unpaid, and it starts to accrue in the unpaid bundle. So again, knowing where these things are being accrued is going to help to identify how to find it. All right, so what are the most common royalty streams generated from a variety of music usage types, and where do these royalties flow? There are thousands of royalty streams for hundreds of music usage types with individual royalty flows based on the income participant. Take, for example, a sound recording of a song written by two songwriters that airs on SiriusXM. So this is what it looks like in the United States. Excuse me. So the music usage is the digital public performance via satellite transmission. And then the royalty stream is the performance royalty collection for sound recording at the top. And then at the bottom here is the performance royalty collection for musical works. And then the actual royalty flows, which are how the royalties are paid out, includes multiple sort of branches. So you have the record label being paid directly by Sound Exchange, the feature performers being paid directly by Sound Exchange, and then you have Sound Exchange paying another organization called the AFM and SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Rights Distribution Fund, which covers background vocalists and session musicians. I want to talk about this because this is important. A lot of creators that are independent artists sometimes performs on the works of their friends as a session musician or a background vocalist, or a music producer might actually contribute instrumentation, live instrumentation to their production. So a music producer might just play keys or provide some background vocals. But a lot of times, especially in the independent music space, those background vocals and session musician contributions are not being properly credited. And if they're not properly credited, then the AFM and SAG-AFTRA fund is not going to allocate royalties to those parties. Note that this branch that comes from Sound Exchange, it goes to AFM SAG-AFTRA. This is going to be paid out to AFM and SAG-AFTRA regardless of whether or not the actual sound recording has background vocals or session musicians. So I can record a song that doesn't have any background vocals, which obviously it would, or it wouldn't. Maybe it doesn't have any third-party background vocalist. Maybe I'm the feature performer, but I'm also doing my own background vocals. It may not have any third-party background vocalist, and we may not have any live instrumentation. However, that royalty stream still exists. It's still going to be carved out of the Sound Exchange collections, and it's going to flow through the AFM and SAG-AFTRA. So, my recommendation is that for music producers, if you don't know how to play an instrument, then learn how to play an instrument and try to play live instruments on the track, or try to provide some background vocals, because the royalties are going to accrue against that work anyway. But if no one is credited as a background vocalist or a session musician, then they're not going to get paid. So that's really important. Then at the bottom, you see the royalty stream is performance royalty collection for musical work. This is the song, the melody, and so forth. And that goes out via ASCAP, BMI, and CSEC here in the United States. There's also GMR, which is a independent private collection society. And here there are two songwriters. So you see songwriter 1, and then at the bottom you see songwriter 2, and they get their payments from whichever PRO they're associated with. And then you have the two publishers. So publisher 1 is associated with songwriter 1, and then let's say songwriter 2 has his own self-published entity, and uses an administrator to collect his publishing income. So that's going to flow through the administrator of Music Publisher 2, which Music Publisher 2 is the self-published entity of Songwriter 2. So that's royalty flows and royalty streams and music usage. Now, the exact same recording can be performed on Sirius XM, not only in the United States, but also in Canada. And that's going to look totally different. Right, so now we have at the top, you see it looks much different than the United States. Let me go back really quick, and you see we have the royalty flows from Sound Exchange, and then now we have the organization called Resound, which, similar to Sound Exchange, collects the digital performance royalties for sound recordings in Canada, and then they pay out to two groups of organizations. They pay out to Connect and Soap Rock, which then flows to record labels, which are their members. And then they also pay out to the Recording Artists Collecting Society, and then MROC and Artiste, which they pay out to performers. So including feature performers and non-feature performers, which are the background vocalists and session musicians. So these organizations are members of Resound. Record labels and performers can also join Resound. So it really depends on how this is structured. If you're in the United States and you want to collect your neighboring rights income directly at source in Canada, then you can actually join Resound in Canada, or these organizations. You can join MROC, for example, as a U.S. performer that wants to collect in Canada. The performance royalty collection for musical works at the bottom is done through SOCAN, and SOCAN is basically similar to ASCAP and BMI in Canada, and they pay out very similarly the same way. So that's one example. Like I said when we started this section, there are thousands of royalty streams for hundreds of different usage types, with individual royalty flows. And this is just two, obviously. There are organizations that, there are websites that have a number of resources that have different examples of royalty flows. I'm going to show you a few right now. See if I can share my screen. All right, so a couple that I think are pretty good. So if you're not familiar with Ari Hurston, Ari is an independent artist who has a website called Ari's Take. He creates a lot of really good information for targeting music creators, but also music managers. He takes a deep dive in a lot of different areas to try to break these things down for artists. So he recently published these artist royalty flow charts, which I think look really, really great. So I want to share these charts. So this is how artist royalties flow in the United States. You have the artists down here, and you see that there's for TV, radio, bars, etc. There's sound recording performance royalties. Again, we don't have a neighboring rights organizations in the United States, so there is no neighboring rights royalties. But for Canadian artists, you would receive neighboring rights royalties through your through Resound or through your organization connected to Resound. For digital radio, however, we do have Sound Exchange. So again, that flows to the artists. Sound Exchange also would deliver the royalties to Resound for the digital radio performances in the United States, and vice versa. Resound would deliver to Sound Exchange for the digital radio royalties in Canada. For sound recordings, you have your downloads, sales, and interactive streaming revenue, which flows to your distribution company. And you have your TV shows. For any master use in TV shows or gaming, we call that sync use or sync licensing. And that flows through from your label or from your sync licensing agency. And then for vocalist and commercials, there's the SAG-AFTRA has a sound recording and a music department, so that for sound recordings that are earning royalties, it flows through for union vocalists. And then for commercials, there may be residuals if it's a union commercial, and that flows through SAG-AFTRA as well. The other one is for songwriters. So for the composition, again, you have sync, which is syncing up a composition or musical work to a visual work. So TVs, movies, commercials, and so forth. So there's a sync fee. Then the public performance of the compositions. And then you have the reproduction of compositions. We don't have a mechanical rights organization yet in the United States. So streaming services use third-party administrators like Harry Fox and Music Reports to handle their mechanical licensing obligations, and they make those payments to songwriters and publishers. And then download stores also have mechanical royalties, which are paid to recording artists in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Outside of United States, Canada, and Mexico, it's paid through a mechanical rights organization. So those are two really good charts that I like. Another good set of charts is from the Future of Music Coalition. So the Future of Music Coalition provides really good detailed breakdown based on the type of service. So for example, for songwriters, artists, publishers, and labels, for radio and radio-like services, this is how that income flows. So you have broadcast radio such as AM/FM stations. Again, they only pay on the performance side. They don't currently pay on the sound recording side. So there's no royalty for that in the United States. However, in Canada, there is. Again, that falls under the neighboring rights income. Then you have webcast or digital performance. Again, I just showed you an example of that, which was SiriusXM, where the PROs, the ASCAP, and CSAC, receives the performance royalties for the composition, and then Sound Exchange receives the digital performance royalties for the sound recording. Sound Exchange then pays out to labels and performers, and then AFM, SAG-AFTRA, and then ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC pays out to songwriters and publishers. So I just broke that down for you in the previous slide. For digital sales, so for digital sales, including downloads, basically, that income flows through the record label when they have direct deals. But a lot of independent artists and independent labels use aggregators or distributors, so that will flow through aggregator to the record label and then to the artist. There's also mechanical royalty that flows from the record label to the publishers, and that has to be accounted to. This is something I also want to point out. So if you represent artists who are signed to a label contract and you're receiving payments for sound recording, for downloads, or for physical sales, there is also a mechanical royalty due to the songwriter and the publisher. And if that artist is also the songwriter, then there's a mechanical royalty due for that. Depending on your contract, that may be collateralized with your earnings for the label for the recording contract. And for artists that use distributors like CD Baby and TuneCore, again, it's a similar flow, except the royalties may be paid through a third party as far as the mechanical royalties. They may be using, for example, Slingshot, which is Harry Fox's service. So it's important to know that when music is streamed on Spotify or if it's downloaded on iTunes, in addition to the master side royalties being generated, there's a royalty for the performance, the public performance of these composition, as well as for streaming service like Spotify. And then there's a mechanical royalty for the streaming service like Spotify, and then there's a mechanical royalty for the download like iTunes or Amazon. Those royalties are often left on the table and not collected. All right. So again, those are just two examples of the different flows of royalties. If you go to the Future of Music Coalition website, there's a lot more there. You can Google search just Future of Music Coalition, and I believe the title is simply Music and How the Money Flows. So if you Google search music and how the money flows, you should be able to see that. So next question, how are music royalties allocated and distributed by music rights organizations? So here in the United States, again, it depends on the license type and who issues the license and the royalty collection and so forth. But here's a breakdown of the different types of music rights and where those royalties are flowing. So in the very first column, you see the license type and the right that is associated with. So a public performance license, which gives you the right, gives the user the right to public perform or the right to publicly display musical work. Those licenses are issued by organizations such as ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC, and GMR. And the royalty collection is also done through ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR. And it's paid out 50% to the publisher and 50% to the writer. We don't have a mechanical rights organization in the United States yet. We will have an agency in 2021 called the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which will handle the licensing of interactive streaming services such as Spotify and Tidal and Google Play and Apple. But in the meantime, the digital services that are streaming services, they use the Harry Fox Agency and Music Reports and Louder as a administrator of their statutory licenses, as well as some of their direct licenses. So Harry Fox and Music Reports, they will pay out the publisher, and then the publisher pays the writer. Harry Fox also has affiliate publishers where they represent for the issuance of mechanical licenses for the reproduction of compositions. So if I'm a publisher and people want to do covers of songs in my catalog, or if a label is signing an artist and signs or hires one of my songwriters to write a song, then they can get the mechanical license through Harry Fox if my organization has joined Harry Fox. Another thing I want to point out about Harry Fox, and this is also a myth that needs to be clarified, is that Harry Fox is an agent in the United States, but they can collect, and they do collect, mechanical royalties that are international. So when you sign up for Harry Fox, there's really two ways of signing up for Harry Fox. One is to create a HFA online account, and the other is to actually affiliate with Harry Fox. So again, one is to create an HFA online account, and the other is to affiliate with Harry Fox. When you affiliate with Harry Fox, then you can actually unlock the royalties for international mechanical. Harry Fox will collect those. Your synchronization is, we don't have a synchronization organization, so that's done directly with the publisher. Same thing for the other types of rights that are not collective rights. You have the digital public performance. which is, again, something that's unique to the United States. We don't have neighboring rights like Canada, so we only have digital performance rights in sound recordings, and that's administered through Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange pays out 50% to the label, 45% to the feature performer, and then 5% to the session musicians and background vocalists, which goes through AFM and SAG AFTRA fund. For producers, so music producers who are entitled to income participation needs to provide Sound Exchange with a letter of direction in order to unlock those royalties. And Sound Exchange has a program called the Creative Affiliate Program. And if you go to Sound Exchange website, you can go to the Creative Affiliate Program and sign up. And that helps music producers who receive an allocation to be able to process that through Sound Exchange for the digital radio performances. Master use is, again, for the master side, the sound recording, that's directly licensed through the label, and the label receives 100% of that income and pays out the artist per the contract, the recording contract. And then there's a thing called the dark royalties, which is a statutory obligation. And there's an organization called the Alliance for Artists and Record Companies. And this is for private copy and record rentals around the world as well. They don't have a specific distribution rate, but we've calculated to be around 58% to the label, 38% to the featured performer, and 4% to session musicians and vocalists. This is kind of a rough estimate. So that's a simple breakdown. Each organization, again, has membership requirements, so you have to actually join the organizations. By joining and registering your works, that will unlock any back royalties that may have been due and unpaid. And it makes it much easier for you to prevent unclaimed royalties to accrue by making sure that you've properly joined all these organizations and are providing them with the works on a regular basis. All right, what are niche funds and sub-funds that often generate unmatched so-called black box royalties, and how do you check for records? So the most popular, again, unclaimed royalties are mechanical rights, or mechanical royalties, and neighboring rights royalties. So, these are royalties that a lot of artists leave on the table because we don't have a mechanical rights organization in the United States, and we don't have neighboring rights organizations in the United States. We don't have neighboring rights at all in the United States. However, mechanical royalties are generated outside the United States, so in Canada, and there's an organization called CMRA, and then SOCAN. Within SOCAN, there's SODRAC. So if you are a songwriter in the United States, you would want to affiliate with CMRA. Let me see if I can open that up, and I'm going to open that up shortly. So then there are a number of small funds, and these small sub-funds are, I'm going to share my screen to show this, but these small sub-funds are generally administered by some of the organizations, but it's hard to tell sometimes if they're actually accounting to individuals. So for example, the United States royalty funds. So you have what I call fund administrator, and then we have the fund name, and also the statute of limitation in terms of how long before the unpaid royalties may be forfeited. Then the associated licenses and agreements under which these funds are operated, the pay type, and then the sources of royalties. So this is super important from a royalty forensic standpoint. You want to be able to go to these funds when possible. So Sound Exchange has a digital radio royalties fund, and there's the artist sub fund, right? So the artist sub fund is basically for the featured artists. It comes from non-interactive digital services. If you're looking for royalties, then we have to search the unclaimed royalty list. So on the Sound Exchange website, you can go to the main website so you can see how I get here. You go to the Sound Exchange website, and then you go to artist and copyright owner. And then we go to, does Sound Exchange have royalties for you? And then you'll see there's for artists and there's rights owners. So then you can actually search the unclaimed royalties fund. See, this is the actual list. And I can search a name if I wanted to. So these are for feature performers for the digital radio performance. So again, like that Sirius XM example that I showed earlier, that will fall under this. Okay, for rights holders, meaning labels, you have a list as well. So you can search, labels or label imprints. There's thousands of records. Here it says 9,929 records for copyright owners or labels, also sometimes called producers, but we don't mean music producers. And then there's 199 records shown for performers. So it's important to search these records. This is a part of the forensics process, is using the publicly available search for this stuff. Then we have the AFM and SAG-AFTRA fund. As like I mentioned before, there are featured artists and non-featured artists who generate income here. It's not only for, again, there's multiple funds here. It's not just for the digital radio performance. That's just one source of income. Again, they have multiple funds that stem from multiple agreements between different societies, different organizations, different territories. So these different funds generate different income streams. So you can search their unclaimed royalties. So you go to the afmsagaftrafund.org. So I go to that main site, so afmsagaftrafund.org, and then you click on unclaimed royalties. And again, this is a searchable list. This is updated as of May 20th, 2019. And this is their complete list of artists or non-feature performers that are owed royalties that are associated with sound recording and audiovisual works. So again, this should be on the list of places to search. Then we have the Harry Fox Agency. That Harry Fox Agency doesn't actually have a public records of unclaimed royalties because they are a third-party administrator on behalf of the services that they represent mechanical licensing for. However, by signing up with Harry Fox and registering your works, they will match. They will go back several years. I mean, I have clients where we recently went back to 2013 and was able to unlock Spotify mechanical royalties for an independent artist, and he started to get paid out thousands of dollars for that usage. So currently, the way the digital services in the United States submit their notices of intent. So a notice of intent is a obligation that they have to send. It's a notice they must send to the copyright owner to notify them that the work is going to be used or distributed in a phono record on their service. So anytime, Spotify, Google, so forth, every single day, they are receiving tens of thousands of sound recordings in the United States, and they have to submit to the Copyright Office. Well, they have to submit to the publisher. But if they cannot identify the publisher, this goes back to registration. If they cannot identify the publisher in the public records of the Copyright Office, meaning the work has been registered, then they deliver the notice of intent, which is the notice saying that, hey, we're using your song, and they deliver it to the Copyright Office, and it's filed here. And these are public records, so anyone can download it. Download one so you can see what it looks like. So this is Amazon. And again, this is called a notice of intent. So this is basically a notice to the copyright owner that Amazon is going to distribute a sound recording that embodies the musical work. That goes back to the right of reproduction and distribution for the musical work. Amazon already has information regarding the label side, so they've already licensed or received permission for the label side, because the label distributes the sound recording to Amazon, but they don't have the permission from the publisher or the writer. So this is what that looks like. So this information is all pretty standardized. Amazon licensing is administered by an organization called Music Reports. So because Music Reports does not have information about the authors of the songs that are listed here, that are titles. So here's a title: Friends Like These, People Like Me. So here's a title. Here's the artist that's performing it. So we know the information such as the title of the song and the artist, and we know information such as the label name, the release date or expected date of distribution. But what is unknown here is this section here, the authors and the copyright owner. So because the author and the copyright owner is unknown, the notice, which each of these rows is one notice, by the way. So each row is technically an individual notice to a rights holder. And if you can see in this particular record, we have over 4,000 rows. So over 4,000 notices is included in this one Excel file. And then it's Amazon's responsibility to remit these notices. However, our copyright law in the United States currently, it's stated that if you're not identified in the public records, then you're not eligible to receive mechanical royalties. So that meaning if the work was not registered with the Copyright Office and the organization is not able to find your information, then they can actually submit this to the Copyright Office instead. So I'm going to show you really quickly what that looks like. So this is the public record for the Copyright Office. So if they can't find the work, so let's say this song is called Friends Like These. So if I look for Friends Like These and the author is unknown and the copyright owner is unknown. So basically what this is telling me is that if I search for Friends Like These, that's the title. It's really hard to know which of these would be the right title. And it may not be any of them. or it could be one of these, but there could be a number of issues with the way that the work was registered that does not identify the author. So because the work is not identified, the author and the copyright owner is not identified in the public records, then Amazon is sending the notice of intent to the copyright office because they don't have the address. See, if this, let's say this Friends Like These, this was the title. Let's just use this as an example. It's not, but let's just say it was. Then they would know who to send the information to because the copyright claimant is right here. So the letter would have to go to this address. Or for rights permissions, here's the email address. So there's actual contact information. This is a part of copyright research I was talking about earlier. It's identifying, who are the copyright claimants and who is the rights and permissions. This is one way of finding that out. Another way of finding that out is to use the search for different societies. The problem is the societies don't necessarily have all the information for every, they certainly don't have all the information for every title. They only have information for the titles that are registered to them. So if I went to search for Friends Like These at ASCAP, I can also try to pinpoint by using the performer. So let's say who was the performer. Go back to that notice of intent. Okay, the performer is Mesh. So let's see if we can find that. There's no record. But now I have 38 results. So there are a number of titles called Friends Like These. But again, we're not sure which is correct. If I knew that this was the correct one, then I would be able to get information about the publisher. I would be able to send information to the publisher. But the Copyright Office only states, the copyright law only states that they must be searchable or must be in the Copyright Office database, not in ASCAP's database. So this is just a part of the copyright research process of understanding who owns the rights, who are entitled to certain things. So, I mean, this list goes on. There's a number of, so again, Amazon is using music reports. So what I would need to do, if this was my client and their work showed up in that Excel spreadsheet, I would need to go to music reports and to Harry Fox. So go to music reports. Since I know Amazon is looking for my client because they have the notice of intent, and then just click sign up. So you go to sign up, and it says I create or own music, and you have your client sign up to create an account, and then you provide this information to Harry Fox so that it becomes searchable in their database, which is called Songdex. And they use this database to be able to help their clients license. So if the song, that's taking me through the process. Well, the song should show up in their database, just like for Harry Fox. So some of these would be, so Amazon is music reports, but then Spotify is going to come from Harry Fox, and they have a similar process. You go to Harry Fox. And then you can sign up. So music creators. Okay. As a music creator, you have to sign up as a publisher. You're self-published. So you can actually sign up as a publisher, and when you join, you want to join. You can join to create a HFA online account, or which is different, or you can join as a HFA affiliate, which would then unlock international mechanical royalties. And then Harry Fox has their own search engine as well, called Songfile. So Songdex is for music reports and song files for Harry Fox, and I can use their public search here. So I'm also trying to find Friends Like These. So let's see if Friends Like These is here. Well, we don't know who the writer is because we couldn't find that. So the title is Friends Like These. She was going to let me search without a writer. Okay, here we go. So here are all the Friends Like These, and here's the writer information. But again, we don't know which of these is the right song because we don't know who the writer or the copyright owner is in this particular notice. So this is why it's important to make sure the work is registered with these organizations in advance. Two more I want to show you for these sub funds. Here's one, the Film Musician Secondary Markets Fund. So if you're a film musician and you, these are royalties earned when a musician performs on a theatrical or film release, and that's re-released in a secondary market. So if you're a musician or you represent a musician and they perform on film or TV, then the Film Musician Secondary Market Fund in the United States will have their own, again, unclaimed checks list. And you can go here and see that information. So these are all unclaimed checks. I showed you already unclaimed checks for AFM SAG AFTRA. I showed you unclaimed checks for Sound Exchange. Those are all United States. Outside the United States, so like in Canada, some of the organizations also have their own unclaimed portals. So for example, let me see if I can find it here. CMRA, which handles mechanical royalties in Canada, as well as Soldrak, has an unclaimed works portal, and they have a video on basically how that works. So, if you are a US creator and you have music being released on services in Canada, for sure it's earning mechanical royalties. And you can directly join CMRA and unlock those royalties, or you can join Harry Fox and opt in to have them collect your international royalties, including Canada and other territories. So they have their unclaimed as well. Let's see, this Resound. And a lot of other organizations, have these unclaimed lists that you can search and see if there's anything in it. I did found Royalty Claim, again, which was a search engine. I don't operate Royalty Claim anymore. I sold the company back in 2017. But Royalty Claim, what we did with Royalty Claim was we captured a lot of this data from a number of sources, including sources on the list that I'm going through right now, and provided a searchable dashboard so that you can put in a title or a name and see if something comes up in the records. And then it provides you information on how to go about claiming that that particular royalty. All right. So those again are some funds that are unclaimed royalties. A lot of organizations have multiple funds. For example, ASCAP BMI have a number of sub funds that they administer. It's not clear all the time on when royalties are being paid from certain sub funds, but they do exist. So what are some tools and resources to help you research for, identify, and claim unclaimed royalties and music licenses? So first, you need to identify the usage. And there's tools such as Warm, TuneSet, ProTunes, Mediabase, BDS Radio, which will help you identify or detect usage. And these reports can be used to help audit statements or kind of reconcile statements. So let me just show you a few of these companies. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so Warm Music is actually a new company. It's a startup. I'm still getting to learn more about them, but I've spoken with the founder previously. But Warm is a platform, as soon as it loads up here, a platform that tracks radio usage, radio performances around the world, around the globe. And they claim to be able to provide you a real-time detection report of your music performing in radio. I'm not sure why there's a little lag on loading their website. Shame. The website loads pretty fine outside the webinar. Well, while that's loading, let's check out another website. So TuneSet is another service that will help you detect your music used on TV and websites. So let's say you have your music synced in a TV show or commercial. Then you might want to use TuneSet to be able to help identify where your music is being detected on TV and web, kind of web TV as well, on websites. So they provide reports on detection for that. ProTunes is a platform for syncing, for licensing music for sync, but it also has a really good audio detection platform for detecting music and commercial use and advertisements, so that you can be able to track that information and then provide and get statements, which you can use again in your auditing process or in and matching back against what's been sent to you from any kind of royalty reporting. But from an unclaimed royalty standpoint, if you're able to find that your music is detected on certain websites or TV shows or in certain commercials or on radio, so they track radio, including college radio, all this information is detecting the usage of your music. That gives you a starting point for determining if there are potentially unclaimed royalties. Because if you're seeing that you have some usage in a territory where your works are not registered, then that may indicate that there are unclaimed royalties there. And then you would have to go to that particular territory and then identify which, you go through that process that I talked about in the beginning, the royalty collection process. What are your entitlements? What are your rights? What's the territory? What's the royalty flow specific to that territory for that particular usage type? So for example, if I'm using Warm and I identify that there's a college radio station in Toronto streaming my music, then I start going through that questionnaire. of what are my rights. Okay, well, the rights going to be on this, the sound recording side and the performer rights if I'm a Canadian. But if I'm in the US, I'm not going to have the performer's performance right there. I'm not going to have the neighboring rights. So even though the right may exist, I might not be entitled to it because of the regulations. So again, this is to help you detect the usage of your music across internet, websites, radio, television, and then as far as streaming services, there's a number of platforms out there that track streaming. So there's one, I'm trying to remember the name, right? It escapes me. But there's a number of sites that tracks your streaming usage. And then you want to use that information as well to go back. Okay, yeah, it's called BuzzAngle, just remember. So BuzzAngle. All right, so BuzzAngle is a platform that tracks your music usage in terms of streaming services. So they provide real-time streaming services. What do they have? And they also have their own charts. So again, using BuzzAngle to track streaming services, using Warm to track radio airplay around the world, using TuneSet to track TV and websites around the world, using ProTunes to track commercials and advertisements around the world. Those are the types of tools. There's a lot of other tools out there. These are just a few, but those are the types of tools that you would have to leverage in music royalty forensics to be able to identify usages that you may not be paid for. All right, so what are the requirements to properly set up to be accounted to and paid royalties from previously unaffiliated sources going forward? So creation of an entity to represent your rights in some territories, or direct affiliation to help with certain organizations will help you with that process. I have in the United States, there is a specific number of organizations, same thing in Canada. There's a specific number of organizations you have to join. I'm going to share my screen again really quick to show you a guide here. But Tune Registry, which is my organization, my music rights organization, music rights administration platform. So Tune Registry will enable you to administer your rights in the United States. If you go to our help center, so help.tuneregistry.com, and go to before you use Tune Registry, and then the guide for preparing to use Tune Registry, we actually have a checklist here, a step-by-step guide, basically, that breaks down where you should join. So it shows you, as a creator, you must join or create an account with these organizations. We also tell you how long it takes. It takes about 15 minutes to finish the process if you have all the necessary information already gathered. And as a rights holder, you have to join organizations. If you are a self-published writer or independent artist, you're going to have to join multiple organizations because you have rights as a rights holder, a label or a publisher, and then you have your rights as a creator, so a songwriter or a performer. So you need to join all these organizations. This is a checklist, basically, of how to do that. In Tune Registry, you then set up your different profiles to enable you to administer your rights in the United States, all from one platform. On Tune Registry website, we have a product overview that kind of gives you an overview of how our platform works. I'm not going to go into it. But we also have a guide called the DIY Musician Starter Guide to being your own label and publisher, which breaks down even more detail on how to do all this. But yeah, so you need to join the organizations. Again, for mechanical royalties, you can, when you go to HFA, and sign up, you can create a account as a affiliate, or just as not an affiliate, but you still want to collect your US royalties. Okay. So what are some tips for managing your music rights affiliations? Well, you need to get information for, I recommend that you get information for a contact person at the organization, making sure that you can call that person whenever you have a problem, when you're trying to clear a dispute, when you're trying to get information. You also want to join the email list and attend events of those organizations so that you stay engaged. It's super important to keep your membership information current, and contact information or banking information. You want to keep all that information current so that they're not, so that they don't send the check to the wrong place, and not, provide that information to you. And lastly, what are some tips for preparing your music rights and royalties for beneficiaries? You want to give your organizations your beneficiary information. You never know what will happen. So it's important to have your beneficiary information provided to these organizations, and you may need to update it. For example, I'm going to share my screen one more time. So here's the Film Musician Secondary Market Fund. They have a tab called Beneficiaries, and there's beneficiary resources. So your beneficiary overview, report deceased participants, address change, direct deposits, and so forth. If you are a beneficiary and you're unsure of how to navigate all of this, then you can use an attorney or someone that does this kind of research, and they can help with getting in contact with different organizations to make sure that you're properly identified. But if you are a music creator or a rights holder, or music creator, then you want to make sure that you have beneficiary information already set up with ASCAP, with BMI, with CSAC, with SOCAN, with CMRA, with all your organizations, so that if anything happens to you, your beneficiary information is on file, and it will make it easier for your beneficiaries. You can also prepare a living will. Also account for all copyrights and keep information current. With Tune Registry, that's one way to organize all of your copyright information for your music rights, because again, you can administer your rights through Tune Registry. And then you want to notify beneficiaries of your catalog. Let them know what you performed on. If you're passing down your catalog to a child or a grandchild, they need to know what you actually worked on. Otherwise, someone's got to do all the copyright research that I kind of hinted at earlier. That basically takes a lot of time to go and figure out what you performed on, and it can cost a lot of money. So keeping your records up to date and keeping information up to date and provide that information is going to be helpful. All right, well, thank you for participating. We're a little over 90 minutes, but again, that was a good, I think, primer to getting started in the music royalties forensics. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box. I'll stick around for another 2 more minutes if there's any questions, and I'll answer them. Okay, I have a question that came through. How long does it typically take for HFA to approve you as a non-affiliate? It's been about 2 weeks and I haven't heard from them. Do you have a contact? It could be several weeks, to be honest. I think 2 to 4 weeks is the range. You may want to reach out to them directly. They have an email for client services, but they're trying to process a lot of individual rights holders who are learning about this stuff, and it takes some time. I recommend you reaching out to them directly. If you are a Tune Registry customer, then you can reach out to Tune Registry client success, customer success specialists, and we may be able to help with that. But in general, that takes them a few weeks to get back. But once you do join HFA as a non-affiliate, you can register all of your songs with HFA either directly in their portal or through a service like Tune Registry or through a publishing administrator. And then they will start the process of looking at past royalty statements from their clients like Spotify to start identifying where you may have mechanical royalties. And they go back several years. Again, like I said, we have a client that recently just started receiving checks going back from 2013 for performances from 2013 all the way up to now. And then going forward, that client's going to receive their royalties on a regular basis because they're now registered, and then they register all their works. The question is, do I have an opinion on HFA affiliate versus Song Trust and other global rights collection agencies? Well, Song Trust is a global royalty collection service, and they do work with HFA to collect mechanical royalties. They also have direct affiliation with organizations around the world to collect mechanical royalties. So I don't really have a opinion in the sense of whether or not you should work directly with HFA or work through an administrator like Song Trust. There are more administrators than just Song Trust. There's Centric, there's TuneCore Music Publishing Administration. There's a whole number of independent music publishers affiliated with the Association of Independent Music Publishers. So there's a lot of choices. Generally speaking, and when it comes to North America, United States and Canada, music creators and rights holders have the benefit of being able to directly affiliate with virtually all the organizations in North America. So the question is, does it make financial sense for you to give a third-party administrator anywhere from 15 to 25% of your income that they collect when you can potentially do it directly by joining the organizations? I already showed you the checklist for joining all organizations in the United States. I don't have a checklist for Canada, but I can provide that. But once you join all the organizations, which is the most difficult process in terms of the time it takes, once you join the organization, it's simply providing that organization with your songs every time you create new music, and then you receive that flow of income. There's two benefits. Well, there's many benefits, but two of the benefits for doing it direct, which is why I'm such a proponent of doing it direct, is one, you're able to capture 100% of your royalties from those organizations because there's no third party collecting on your behalf. And number two, you're able to get paid out faster. When a third party collects their royalties, they collect it at the time that it's distributed from the rights organization, but generally administrators pay out on a quarterly basis. So, for example, if you're using an administrator to collect your performance royalties through ASCAP will, if you have royalties that are earned in January of 2019, ASCAP will pay that out around October of 2019. But then your administrator therefore collects it in October of 2019, and then they pay out the close of the quarter. So that would be January of 2020. So you're waiting an additional up to like 4 months to collect royalties that you could otherwise collect directly without even paying a commission. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate your time. There will be a replay video going out, so you'll be able to dive through this information again and kind of rewatch it and take notes. You can also email me and ask a question or two. I appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.